Are here where we are live and taking your questions and having a conversation about carbon intensity, about data, about farming, about biofuels. Lots of things to hit on here today. I'm excited to get this over to get my guest in here in just a minute. But let me set the stage. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Mitchell Hora. I'm the founder at Continuum Ag, and we're a software company helping provide the MRV for carbon intensity, but really helping farmers just manage their data, tell their carbon footprint story, tell their sustainability story. It all boils down to data and driving these outcomes to be more sustainable often means implementing soil health principles like reducing tillage, adding cover crops, improving our fertilizer optimization. And that's our background. That's really what got us into this space is helping farmers understand these soil health principles and understand regenerative management. But now we got to tell our story and get that story told in a verified manner so that it actually has more legitimacy to it and hopefully drive more monetary value because of that legitimacy. So before we jump into that, though, I do want to do a little shout out and mention that it is soil sampling time of year. And Continuum, originally, we did a lot of Haney soil health testing through our Right Way soil sampling program. We've often talked just about carbon intensity, but for anyone who is interested, we still do offer the Haney soil health test and zone fertility management here. Included in the fee for Right Way is variable rate fertilizer prescriptions and access to our agronomist to consult you through managing your nutrients better and hopefully save some money on fertilizer and really try to hit this year with an additional set of data so you can manage your fertilizer and drive yield as best as you can. If you want more information about our right way soil sampling, you can contact Sophia or send us a message here. We can get you connected with somebody. So, without further ado, let's bring in my special guest here, Jim Ramm. And wanted to have Jim come in and representing EcoEngineers because they were our third-party auditor that we have been working with for almost a year. Not quite a year that we've really been pushing on this. We've known these guys have had a relationship for multiple years, but then finally, kind of at some point in 2024, we decided, all right, let's move forward with going through an audit and verify what we call CI certificates. The government calls them biofuel feedstock reports. It's basically the same thing. And what we were doing is auditing and trying to prove that we can audit the on-farm carbon intensity scores. And so I went through this and we basically have decided let's go forward and be proactive to get this stuff through the audits and verified, really to prove a concept. Continuum had never gone through one of these audits before. I don't know of anybody else that has undergone this type of audit, looking at on-farm carbon intensity scores and auditing with the GREET model. Historically, Continuum Ag has been involved in a lot of different data programs or carbon programs, but we've always helped the farmer to gather the data and then we hand it off to somebody else who provides the MRV and actually takes things through the audit. We've worked with Rabobank and those kind of guys in the past, but we've collected the data, then given it over to them, and they've gone and created the actual verified carbon credits or verified certificates after the fact. But in seeing 45Z coming down the pipe and not knowing of other CI certifiers that would be out there, we identified it as a gap and as a space that Continuum can fill. Of course, we don't know how 45Z is going to work out yet, but we know that it's going to require a lot of data. We know that that data is going to need to undergo audits, and Continuum was just trying to prove some concepts here. So, really excited that we have gone through that whole process. It was a major learning opportunity for Continuum, and uh, we still have a lot to keep learning, and we have got plenty of systems to improve, to do better in additional audits to come. But going from 0 to 1 was huge for us. And Jim, you were massively impactful in getting this across the finish line. I want to thank you again. We've told you before, but you are a really key guy that made this happen, that made this work. So, like I said, thanks again for sticking with us here. And I know it was definitely not all rainbows and butterflies when you're building an MRV protocol, is what we have learned, but we got there. All's well that ends well for certain. And Jim, it was because of you and the other good folks at Eco. So with that being said, Jim, why don't I toss it over to you? I'm going to stop sharing the screen here so that we can people can see us better. But Jim, why don't explain who you are, who Eco is, and Eco now has undergone a recent acquisition too. So set the
Yeah,
stage. Tell us about that.
thanks very much, Mitchell. I really appreciate being here today and really appreciate working with Continuum Ag and the topsoil team with our audit team. So, EcoEngineers is an advisory and audit company. We got started in 2009 when the RFS and the LCFS was getting started. And we've built audit programs in the past, and the thing that we've learned a lot of times, what happens in these programs is, you know, the oversight community, the regulators, they give you a piece of guidance, right? Or Congress gives you a piece of law, right? And then the regulators give you a piece of guidance. And then industry has to come back and say, this is what good looks like. This is what good looks like. And I think that's that's something that Continuum and Topsoil and their members have done, is put something out there to say this is what good looks like. Now we've gone another layer. We've because of our work together. Now you've had a ISO 14064 auditor, our audit team,
Yep.
come back and say, yeah, this is what good looks like, and give you a verified positive certificate, and been out to some of your farm locations
Oh,
to audit those. And so it definitely was a learning experience. So farmers and the farm community and ISO 14064 auditors, they don't always speak the same language. And so there was not all rainbows and butterflies and unicorns. It was not,
yeah.
but we
By
made
the
it.
time it was said and done, though, it was good. It, but I think to your point, Jim, it's all about translating some of this stuff, right? And I oftentimes talk about Continuum as being a translator to put stuff into farmer language, right? So we first went and translated the GREET model into farmer language, right? The way that the folks at the Department of Energy communicate about the parameters of the Greek model are not necessarily using the same words and same phrases and same questions and same units as the farmer uses. So that was our main transition. I
Right,
think that's really our core role in this is translating
right,
IRS code and translating Department of Energy calculators, translating that into farmer friendly, easy for the ag community to understand. And then in this collaboration, taking audit protocol and global ISO procedures and trying to translate that for agricultural usage and on-farm usage uh, was definitely a learning curve, but I think
yeah,
honestly we got there, right? And that's why we wanted to do this proactively, even though to your point, and usually how these things go about is Congress needs to propose something, then the regulators need to propose some stuff, then we go figure out how to interpret it and how to make
that's
it
right.
real and identify what good looks like. And unfortunately, we don't have all the pieces from the regulators yet. We kind of had to guess on part of that. Now, luckily, with what the USDA put out in their proposed guidance, we nailed it because they were mentioning use ISO 14064, 14065. You look at and define the practices in XYZ manner, define the evidence in XYZ manner. And we had already done that,
Right,
and
right.
working off of good enough judgment and you guys' experience and our experience. And we were able to build out a protocol that I think we really nailed what good looks like.
Yeah, that's right. And to be able to uh, respond to the comment period and assert that we're already doing this.
Mhm.
We're already doing this, and that's kind of how you build a good program. It's going to have to be industry based. Our conversations with you and your team have been really excellent. So, a farming company, an agricultural company, um, comes together and meets a greenhouse gas verifier. So we're a greenhouse gas verifier of all different types of commodities and projects, and this is the kind of thing that we've been building over time. What different protocols for different carbon removal type projects. So this is really been an excellent process working with your team.
It's been awesome. So,
So,
Jim, talk a little bit more about eco, and I want to get on the merger and stuff too, because so you're talking, usually you guys are auditors for RFS, Renewable Fuel Standard, and that's the RINs and the production stuff, and then LCFS, which is the low carbon fuel standards, markets like California, Oregon, Washington, Canada, Europe, they've all got these LCFS markets, but none of those necessarily entail a lot of detail about the crop or the feedstock, and not necessarily detail about the carbon intensity or the farming practices of the feedstock. That's really the new thing here, right? Versus
that
what
really is, yeah,
typically
that
done.
really is the new thing. So those programs have always had a default value for the national average of corn or soybeans or the crops. In
Sure.
cornstarch ethanol, that average has always been 29 points ballpark. Uh, so 29 points as a national average, and I think that the key parameters have always been the key parameters that make up that 29. It's always been yield, fertilizer, um, tillage, or farming energy is what we say, and then uh, the other thing is N2O emissions, right? And those are the main factors that really kind of come into it. Yeah,
Yeah, and that 29 number has always just been the default, to your point, from the GREET model. And now, for the first time with 45Z, it looks like there's going to be an opportunity to replace that 29 number. And we found that the average from our network is 11.5. And I don't recall, we were running some of the numbers on our initial audit. And I know it was a pretty good spread, that there was some farms that were around a score of 29 or a little bit worse, and there's some farms that were significantly better. I don't recall the exact spread and some of those metrics. Maybe I'll be able to get a couple of them here quick, but the main thing being is, when farmers are able to tell our story, we're actually finding that we're doing a lot better than those defaults and what we were given credit for.
that's right. That's right. I had a chance to. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about the recent acquisition by
Yeah,
LRQA. Is that okay?
that'd be awesome. Yeah, I
So,
would love, because I want to learn some more about it too.
yeah, I appreciate the chance to even speak to that.
Yeah.
So, we were recently acquired a couple weeks ago by a company called LRQA. So, uh, EcoEngineers, uh, we are about 125 employees today, and we've always created an umbrella of audit and consulting over a carbon space, over carbon auditing and carbon life cycle analysis and consulting around renewable fuels and also voluntary carbon markets. So that carbon umbrella just became part of a much broader and larger umbrella that is around many different types of commerce. And so LRQA, that the that is a spinoff that started in 1985 from Lloyd's Registry, which is a 260-year-old company that it used to make sure that that commerce was safe, and for the East India Trading Company out of England. So today, LRQA provides a risk management umbrella over textiles, over consumer products, over clothing manufacture, um, over cybersecurity, over the inspection of pressure vessels related to refining, nuclear reactors, all types of auditing and all types of risk management. And so to be part of that umbrella, we're really excited about it.
Yeah.
And so to be part of a larger group and to be able to uh, create new things in the economy and safe places for commerce. And it really ties to what you're doing at Continuum. So
Yeah, I think so too. And like I was sharing with you, when I saw the email come through of the acquisition and looking into the company a little bit and the global perspective that they're going to bring and sounds like centuries of history that they've got behind them, it's like, wow, this is going to bring additional rigor, additional value, additional resources, and additional expertise to Continuum, to our partnership and the folks that are involved in the project, and to our farmers, of course, as well, and our biofuel partners. Of hey, here is additional levels of rigor and expertise that is brought to the table here to make this stuff go even more smoothly going forward. Do you see,
I
Jim?
was definitely excited to talk to you about it, to
Yeah,
talk to
it,
you
it
about the
sounds
announcement.
awesome. I mean, this space is just so new to us, right? And to me, like this is not Continuum had zero intention of being in this space at all when I started the company, right? I started the company to do agronomy consulting and help do regenerative ag management and use the Haney soil health test as our niche, right? Then that emerged into, well, hey, we need to be able to tell our carbon story from this because there's people that want access to that story. And hey, we can't just give them willy-nilly, here's our score, here's our data. It's got to be legit. And on my farm this year, our CI score on our corn averaged a 2.6. So I can't go out there and just say, oh yeah, my corn's a 2.6 when the national average is 29 and think I'm gonna just be able to get away with just saying, here's what it is. It needs to pass through audit. It needs to pass through the level of rigor. And I didn't see that in the market and see that existing. And so I guess I'm naive enough, but also energetic about it enough to say, let's go do it ourselves. And
Let's go
that's
do it.
we've done. And so, and Jim, I think, using going the route that we did, right? 14064, 14065. We did that because it was mentioned in the 40B guidance. And I think it does come about in other systems too. And explain it as much as you want, but that ISO protocol is really about greenhouse gas reporting. And it's a global ISO standard, right? It wasn't necessarily something that is specific to 45Z or specific to this tax policy, but it is noted in the tax policy that that is going to be the ISO standard. And in the USDA guidance that they published about uh, auditing the biofuel feedstock CI, they also mentioned that same ISO protocol. So we are, from my observation, right, and I'm seeing some consistencies coming out of DC saying utilize this ISO standard. That's where we then, have been working with Eco to say, okay, let's make that ISO standard legit and working for farmers.
That's right.
And but
That's right.
maybe
So
speak
we
to
always wanted
ISO
to,
standard a little bit more too.
so International Standards Organization.
Yeah.
And so what that means is uh, to be to be certified in order to verify and validate greenhouse gas statements. Now, that's a pretty general standard, right? It's about how do you create the monitoring, reporting, and verification protocol around this, and how do you assign levels of assurance, and um, it's suitable for many different audit programs, and so it's very suitable to what farmers are faced today because farmers participate in multiple markets. So it wasn't just to be a fuel market, but to be a fuel and feed and commodity market. And to have that ISO standard be something that, not only can be used to qualify for 40B, right, and SAF, but also to be used to qualify for other markets, whether that's uh, Canada or uh, food or feed programs that are international. So trying to build a program to an international standard, I think, is the right direction, and it's good to see that continue to be upheld.
I think that's exactly right, and I love you pointing that out. That it's an international standard here that we are auditing against, and that we built the protocol for, to not pigeonhole ourselves into only 45Z, even though it looks like 45Z is also going to say, yeah, utilize this standard.
Mhm.
But the market opportunity is way beyond just 45Z. I sure hope it's going to be anyway, and I thoroughly believe that it will be. Now, unfortunately, there's not a lot of transactions really going in that space yet, at least nothing that I'm seeing, and we want to get into, we want to. That's really our next steps. Is that now we know that we can create supply of these verified CI certificates. We know that 45Z may drive demand, but that demand could come from lots of different markets and lots of different potential buyers. And now we've been able to go through the audit process once and issue the first batch of 29 million verified certificates. Now that can be scaled up and ready for buyers.
That's right. I really think you should celebrate that and count that as a feather in your cap to build a program that could go through and withstand an ISO audit, and it's just more market ready today. When markets take off, I think that you can consider your market readiness to be at a high level,
I think so too.
and so yeah, you and your team, hats off to you for creating something that was, if we waited for, remember that process, right? If we
Mm.
waited for the government to give us the whole thing on a silver platter, it'll never happen because
Yeah,
it
we'd still
can't
be
happen
waiting.
that way. It
Yeah,
has to. It has to be a deal that industry and agriculture come back and say this is what good looks like. If
I
that's
think
not
that's
part of the process, we never get where we need to go.
I think that's so spot on, Jim. And here's how I've been thinking about it, right? And because the farmers that underwent the audit, the farmers paid the bill.
Right.
Farmers paid the bill for all this work that we did here because they want to be first in line and they want to be as good of a position as they can. Now, obviously, I have paid a lot of the bill. My investors have paid a lot of the bill. A lot of our financial backers, we've invested heavily into being in position here to try to capitalize on this. But ultimately, it's trying to be kind of first in line. And yeah, Jim, how I think about it, right, is the law laid out the very bare bones basics of how 45Z should unveil. Then the regulators at the Department of Treasury and most of the Department of Treasury here, they're of course leaning on Department of Energy and somewhat leaning on Department of Ag. They have been starting to put out some of the regulation and some of the executive branch pieces of the rules. We're still waiting on some of that. But to your point, I said let's go ahead and let's go get this first batch of stuff audited because it had never been done before. We didn't know what we were doing, and I knew it was going to take a long time. And
Yeah.
I don't think any of us really were certain that we'd be able to pass on the first go at it. We thought it might take even longer. And so that's why we went ahead to be proactive to build out our own MRV protocol, even though only a little bit of the recommendations were complete from Washington, D.C., because I knew that if we could go through and build it out the first go around, then when the regulation does come from DC, hopefully what we built versus what they say you need, hopefully it's 95% match. And then all we got to
Right.
do is make some adjustments to the MRV protocol and we're off to the races versus the alternative being sit on the sidelines and do nothing until government comes out with something, but it would be probably not very complete because they don't have this, they wouldn't have the dialogue going on and have some people helping to set the standard that this can be done. And I know there's people that are watching us, and of course, you guys are in a lot of these conversations as well. That people are, the folks in DC, they don't know everything. And they're looking to groups like yours and ours that hopefully can give them some hope that this is real and some
This
path
is real.
that this can really happen.
I think that's exactly right. That we can really do a good job on monitoring and
Yeah.
reporting and data aggregation companies. If they could really let data aggregation companies shine and use the data that's available today that's never been available before. And so, all of your creativity in using data platforms, whether it's farm machine data, satellite data, timestamped. Uh,
Yeah, the shape files, the
GPS
photos.
coordinated,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, all of those data forms. So we're not a data aggregation company. I would call you a data aggregation
yeah,
company.
yeah,
So we're not that. What we are is an auditor of that. And then I think the other thing is the ability to avoid double counting in the space, right? So we don't need USDA or Treasury to solve all these problems because industry can participate and solve these problems. Is in a much better position to solve them.
100%.
If we all do what we're best at, we can come up with quite a good solution.
I totally agree. And I think with 45Z and the rigor that's behind it, a lot of this stuff is going to sort itself out because the final user of the 45Z credits, they are subject to undergoing these IRS audits. And
That's right.
sophisticated tax credit buyers like Bank of America, who bought $205 million worth of tax credits from Harvestone, those guys are very sophisticated. They already have their internal audit teams and stuff. They know that the IRS is monitoring all their stuff. They aren't going to buy 45Z credits that aren't full of rigor. And they are
That's
not going
right.
to take on the liability. That liability's got to be passed all the way through. And that's ultimately what we did with you guys, right? Is we said, all right, farmer, we're going to score you based on the GREET feedstock calculator to the fullest extent possible. Now, what we did is that we brought in all the farmer data and we did elect to use some of the defaults where it's going to be really hard to prove otherwise, like energy usage, pesticide usage, some of these things that's really, really complicated. But you had to bring to the table evidence and proof of some of the main drivers of your CI score: the yield, the tillage, the fertilizer, the cover crop. We had to have evidence of all of those things. And the protocol that we built out with Eco was not just for the farmer to go into topsoil and put into the activities tool, here's what I did, but you had to have some type of evidence to back it up. And that's what Jim was just talking: a shape file or machine data, time-stamped geotag photos, receipts, right? They've got dates and allotments and stuff on there. We did not include satellite imagery in the protocol that we went through with you guys, right? However, USDA in their MRV recommendations, they are hinting that satellite imagery maybe could be applicable in their eyes. I think it still has a lot of work to do. I don't like it as the sole piece of evidence. But point being is you can't just say, here's the practices that I did, and therefore here's my CI score. You got to have some evidence to back it up. And that's really where Continuum can help farmers integrate that data in. We can help kind of handhold farmers through this process and try to simplify it as much as we can. And I mean, there was 29 million bushels and hundreds of farmers that were able to do it, even though it was a kind of a clunky first go at it process. But even getting all those farmers through, really setting the proof that we can do it for a lot more of them.
That's right. I
But
think what you're saying. So there's 45Q tax credits that are out on the market for today, right?
yeah,
So a lot of times they'll sell them downstream, and so that downstream buyer they're going to want some kind of a discount on that.
Sure.
There'll be some kind of a discount, but the question is that discount going to be 80 cents on a dollar, or is it going to be 95 cents on a dollar? And so now this year, we're going to start to see 45Z tax credits available on the marketplace.
Yeah.
And so, having a good MRV, having a good data aggregation system, um, a third party audit or validation verification of the system, those are going to trend to, be an
Be
argument in the
worthwhile.
marketplace to get close as you can to the dollar.
Yep. That's exactly right. And Jim, that's really my thesis for why we're going proactive to the farmers as well. Okay, my thesis is if a farmer is selling a verified CI certificate or verified biofuel feedstock report, right? Same thing. It's been attested to, it's been verified. When they are selling that, I believe that the farmer should also get a higher percentage of the 45Z dollar for their proactive efforts. The alternative being the farmer just gives their raw data to an ethanol plant, then the ethanol plant has to undergo the audit of all this raw data, and some of it may be found to be fraudulent, or they're at higher risk of not passing their audit. And now the whole project is all jacked up. Versus if you're buying CI certificates that have already undergone audit, especially with backing of a group like EcoEngineers and hopefully of Continuum, right? That means something. And that massively de-risks the purchase for the ethanol plant, makes them more bankable, makes them more insurable, helps them in those conversations with those tax credit brokers and tax credit buyers. And it makes this whole thing spin faster and brings more people to the table. So I'm seeing a lot of
That's,
that starting to kind of happen, but of course, it's tough for many ethanol plants to start putting too much money behind 45Z when they don't know what the final rules are going to be and they don't know how the feedstock is going to play a role yet because that piece has not been completely
that's
defined.
right. That's right. I mean, they're in a market where until they can turn around and get a premium on the ethanol or the feed or their products, they can't pay an upstream premium outside of some grant situation or pilot program situations.
Yep.
So, yeah, and I think
But
that's a good realization.
in a
To
so
me, to me,
yeah,
the question is how do we, it is an exciting time to think about what's possible, and for it to really be scalable,
yep.
and scalable across the country and in all kinds of soil types and in all the counties where crops are grown. The potential there, if this is done right, it could be that
Absolutely huge.
we could have an impact where farmers in western Nebraska, in your part of the world,
Yeah.
in Iowa, uh, and in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, they can still participate. Minnesota,
Mhm.
even though the regenerative ag practices are a little different in each of those places, and what's going to work, if we do this right, and I'm starting to talk about the potential for book and claim,
Yeah.
um,
That's as good.
that yeah,
I think you're exactly right, Jim, that I talk about 45Z as 45Z done correctly will have a bigger impact on the conservation ag movement than the Farm Bill and things
that's
like
right.
Eco TSB. I think it'll absolutely change the world in terms of how we quantify greenhouse gas emissions from ag, and then that'll lead to not just carbon and greenhouse gas emissions, but other sustainability metrics as well around water quality or biodiversity or what have you. It's setting a precedent here for how to quantify on-farm impact, how to bring evidence to the table from farmers, how to get it through accredited audit, protocols like what we've been able to prove, and then of course get it into a market as well. And to what you were just hinting at, book and claim. makes that scalable and makes that more open,
Yeah,
more real, more transparent, brings more, it levels the playing field and allows everyone to participate.
that's right. So let me talk
But
about
yeah,
that a little
we got
bit.
to get that, we got to get that through the public comment periods and stuff here and help DC to get this done correctly so it can have this big impact.
Yeah, the idea being that the the farm producer could take the commodity with the environmental attributes. So it has a farm gate carbon intensity with it, right? It has a farm gate certificate with those bushels. But you take it to the first point of delivery, and once you deliver the commodity, you separate the commodity, the corn commodity, from the certificate, and then the certificate can go somewhere else where it's needed to go.
Yeah.
Instead of instead of you needing to get that bushel to that renewable fuel production facility, it just saves so much and it makes so much more possible. And the
Yep.
thing that an example here, Mitchell, is renewable natural gas. Because renewable natural gas has that book and claim capacity, uh, that's the reason that it can really take off.
Yep.
Because just by connecting to the pipeline, so
Yep.
uh, then
Get,
they
get
can
blended in
separate the
with the
credits.
commodity with everyone else's. It's
Right.
blended in, it's commodity like everyone else's. Same thing here for the corn and soybeans or other feedstock. And yeah, Jim, in our public comment to the USDA, we were really pushed on three main talking points. One, use book and claim rather than mass balance. Exactly to your point. The corn can go where the corn needs to go. Let's sell the certificates separate. It's open, it's transparent. And I believe that farmers that have these verified certificates will get better price discovery, better price transparency, and be able to get a better value for all their
Right.
efforts. Number two, we were advocating for ditch the USDA feedstock calculator and just use the GREET feedstock calculator that we've
Yeah.
already got. That's what we audited with you guys. So obviously I've got some bias towards that, but I don't recall, Jim, on what Eco's talking points were, but in our argument, right, that GREET feedstock calculator is the most thorough thing that we've got, the most scientifically backed calculator that we've got. It already has the science and the acceptance behind it. Is it perfect? No, plenty far from it. None of these calculators are perfect. If we wait for perfection, we're going to still be sitting here arguing 30 years from now and still not have this figured out. So we got to start with something. And that was really what we were pushing for is just use the GREET feedstock calculator because the USDA feedstock calculator that the Biden administration pushed out at the end of their term, it's got a lot of issues with it and a lot of just fundamental flaws, including not even having actual yield and productivity. Therefore, you can't actually do a CI
Yeah.
score knowing your
Yeah.
field by field or your per acre yield, but no
Right.
manure, no fertilizer rates, and we kind of skipped by it before. We were talking about the big drivers and big driver of your CI score being fertilizer, and especially the nitrous oxide impact, which is driven by the rate of fertilizer that you apply. And this USDA feedstock calculator doesn't even have fertilizer type and rate included. Therefore, you can't even, they're not even quantifying the biggest greenhouse gas impactor
Right. It doesn't
in
even have yield. It doesn't even have
and
yield.
have yield. It's just a lot of flaws, and I think in order to get the program off the ground, we can't just start with a different or new thing. Let's utilize the great feedstock calculator that's already there. Continue to work together and work with Dr. Michael Wang and the other folks at Argonne National Lab to continue to improve that model and continue to strive for improvement as we go. But um, what's your thoughts on that, Jim? Or you guys' take on
I
the
mean, that's absolutely our thoughts.
yeah,
So our the head of our life cycle analysis team,
yeah,
Zhizhao Wang, Dr. Zhizhao Wang he goes by Z, and he came to us from Argonne National Lab.
yeah,
So he's been with us for a decade, and he's built a program here. And what I've learned to appreciate over time is that let's remember that the farm data has gotten better and better and better over the last 25 years, especially. and the amount of digital data that's
Yeah.
available has gotten so much better, so much stronger. So back uh, in the beginning, we were basing this on very little da- data. I mean, they were trying to guess what you know. The average CI on corn is considered to be 29. Well, it was a lot worse 15 years ago,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
and so we have to remember that. So Argonne National Lab built the GREET model,
Yeah.
okay, and they continue to improve it. They continue to put out new versions every year to serve a developing need, a developing economy. Argonne National Lab is part of the Department of Energy. And so I would much rather be tied to Argonne GREET
Yeah.
because I know that it's going to be improved every year with evolving data sets. And
100%.
that's critical. If
100%.
whereas if we spin something off and make it part of the IRS, it just becomes kind of a legacy thing, and
Yeah.
it doesn't grow with the growth in agriculture and the growth in um,
And I think they're
farm
trying to
data.
model, their USDA was trying to model off of like the 40B GREET model, right? Which was for a 2-year tax credit program. They kind of spun off a version of the GREET model. And California, they have their own too, right? But California, do they update theirs? They update theirs more periodically or not really? They just
They do. They
stay.
update it every 3 years,
Oh,
and
3 years.
um, yeah, they do. And so Argonne's work can have an influence on California
Okay.
on a regular basis too. Yeah,
But they're looking at stuff every 3 years, and my understanding is that can be a pretty laborious process if you're trying to get in as a accepted pathway with them or try to get part of that uh try to be part of their updates. And it sounds like there's a lot of people trying to knock on that door and uh a lot of bureaucracy that you gotta get through, to put it lightly.
I think that yeah, I think that it's good to have Midwesterners who believe in the agricultural economy solve this problem, and not expect California to solve this problem for us.
Totally agree. I Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to keep pushing forward on these public comment periods and stuff. And Jim, looking through some of the comments that closed out last week, I thought there was a lot of people that were talking the same talk as us here. A lot of book and claim, a lot of just use the GREET feedstock calculator, a lot of hey, keep with the ISO audit protocol, but try to simplify things a little bit. There was some of the stuff in that USDA MRV protocol that just didn't make any sense. Um, so it was really encouraging to see quite a bit of consistency, at least from the comments that I was looking through, and I didn't get to even close to half of them, but a lot of people that
Yeah,
are interested and a lot of conversation that still has to happen in DC, of course, as this is actually being built out to fruition. Because kind of to your point, right? We got the law from Congress. Now the regulator piece is still kind of in flux, even though we've got the implementation stuff already proven out. We got to get that middle piece solidified. And Jim, I'm hoping, and speaking out loud for everyone else here too, that USDA public comment period just closed. The IRS has their public comment period open until April 10th. So we're working on our comments for them right now as well. And what we're going to do is kind of give a high level, here's what you should do with 45Z in totality. Here's the impact. Here's how we think you should go about it from the our piece, right? From the feedstock piece. Here's our recommendations of what you guys should do. And then the Trump administration is going to have to pull in the comments and look at what the Biden administration did. And hopefully they start making some progress on this by this summer. Because at least from our view, farmers need a little bit of clarity that this is being worked on and that this is going to happen. I think the ethanol plants need a little bit of clarity that, hey, this is going to happen. Because it just seems like a lot of people, unfortunately, we kind of have to sit and wait a little bit right now. And that's not a good position to be in. And we want to be able to keep moving forward. but we need a little bit of clarity from the regulators that they're actually working on this and that they're actually going to get it done. It sounds like the intent is there and the interest is there and the bipartisan support is there to get this done, but we need to see that there's some momentum being made.
Yeah, I agree with you. Sometimes it's does industry follow regulation or does regulation follow industry? And
Mhm.
I think we might be in a situation where regulation might follow industry. So I really do believe farm gate carbon intensity is out of the gates. We are moving there. It is going to happen, right? And at some point, I think regulation will follow where industry is at today.
Yeah.
And and the uh, we saw the same thing, Mitchell, in the development of the QRIN program, which is under the Renewable Fuel Standard. By the time it was all, there were a lot of comments, there were a lot of guidance that wasn't realistic to
Sure.
what could be done. But by the time it finally got there, when the EPA finally set out their last guidance on what a QRIN would be, we turned our application around in a week because we were already doing it, right?
Oh, that's awesome.
And so I believe that, and I hope that you'll be there in the same kind of position, that
Yeah.
it will be book and claim, and that data aggregation companies will play that really important role. And then also validators and verifiers. When you were talking about the blood, sweat, and the tears that went into what you've built, I identify that. I think we had a few drops of blood working
Yeah.
with your team, but but
Just a couple, maybe just tears. I
we're
don't think
not
there was
doing
any blood, just tears.
just a few
But
tears.
yeah, a few tears. But it was because we wanted to make it legit and wanted to make it rigorous, and it's us as farm kids with no audit background at all, and then audit experts with
Yeah,
little, farm background, and we're trying to
right,
get on the same
right,
page. And we're
right.
I think we were mostly talking the same thing. We were just sometimes passing each other on the highway. We're on the same road. We were just passing each other, and we just needed to we had to get in the same lane, and we eventually did. But
There
yeah, I
was
mean,
some passion. There
it,
was some passion, like
there was
passion about what's real world
yeah,
farming,
yeah,
and passion about what is a
mhm,
verified
yeah,
carbon claim.
yeah. That's right.
So
It,
there's two kinds of passion that
that's
once in
right.
a while.
But I think that's why it was so awesome, though, that to work with Eco and have Continuum be one of the first ones to be the first ones to go try to figure this out is because we do have an understanding of what it takes to be legit from an audit perspective, and we have a very thorough understanding of what's going to be realistic from farmers. And we were able to find a common ground there that satisfies all of it. And then when the USDA came out with their MRV recommendations, it was almost exactly what we had already built. So it just, in my mind, it just solidified that what we had been doing was spot on. And I think to your point, right, as soon as we get some buyers, as soon as we get some green light from DC, we are off to the races. I mean, we've got 29 million bushels that already went through the audit. Sure, maybe there'll have to be an update to that audit, or reissue something, or we resubmit them to you guys the if there's a new 45Z CF GREET feedstock calculator that comes out, or if they do make some modifications to the MRV protocol or to the attestation or whatever. That's fine. We've already got it all put together. We already have all the data. If it needs to be re-upped for some reason, that's no big deal. And we've got 350 some million bushels where those came from in the pipeline of farmers that are interested and want to move forward. So I think exactly to your point, as soon as we get a little bit of movement from DC and solidifying, yep, here's what we're going to do, we're off to the races because we already have the foundation built.
Yeah.
and there we
Yeah.
go.
What an
And
awesome,
our intent is very,
market. What an awesome market it'll be
yeah,
if we can create it, right? Where there's a commodity crop coming off, but there's also an environmental attribute
yeah,
crop coming off, and that's going where it needs to go. So it
yeah,
could be that it might be going to a renewable fuel producer in California.
yeah.
Not the commodity, but the
Certificates,
crops, and then
data.
that
Yeah,
that might drive some LCFS markets or some Canada fuel markets or IRS tax credits. I mean, there's a lot of potential.
I think so too. It would be awesome if the 45Z rules just start with book and claim and really set that as a precedent and set some
Mhm.
standards there. But I think, Jim, to your point too, and I'm basically in the mindset of let's just go do it anyway, and let the regulation kind of catch up, or go directly to the supply chain and to corporates and companies in the supply chain, whether it be for biofuel purposes or animal ag or whatever, because everyone's after the same type of data. So many companies after data to prove their decarbonization effort. Um, so I think it's just move forward and build these markets anyway. In my mind, the writing's on the wall that there's gonna continue to be more, life cycle analysis done at the company level. They're gonna need more data about their scope 3 emissions and their supply chain, and these type of certificates, I think,
Yeah. So
should
the
emerge as
number
the
one,
should
yeah,
emerge
the
as the
number
gold
one
standard
thing,
for quantifying that.
yeah, the number one thing I would say is I was very encouraged to see the regulators ask for comment on book
Yeah,
and clay about how we might be able to do this. And I think the other thing is that industry can solve double counting. They do
that's right.
not have to get hung up on double counting. Industry will solve it, and downstream parties will demand it that the double counting be addressed.
That's
That
right.
there's no possibility that if they're going to pay 90 cents on a dollar, 95 cents on a dollar for a downstream tax credit, they're going to darn well want to know that it's not double counted.
That's right. We've been working with a company called Millpont to solve for that for us. Where and I'll get my buddy Dominic on one of these at some point, but I've mentioned him on some of our shows a little bit. But Millpont, basically the concept there is that the whole project that we audited with Eco, we can post the project on their it's not a registry, it's a clearinghouse is what they call it, but we can basically put all the shape files on there, and they have a system where it unique IDs all of those shape files, so there's no actual grower identifying information, but they're able to use geospatial referencing to see, does that field boundary or that parcel, is it included in anybody else's project as well, to make sure spatially there's no double counting. Then we post on there the verified CI certificates that we created to say, okay, if that boundary is on there, but it's has a carbon claim going for one project and it has a biodiversity claim for another project, that's allowed because they're not double counting the same environmental attribute of a carbon outcome. Then we also are able to document where the certificates started versus where they eventually got sold to. It's kind of a traceability program as well. It's going to be it's awesome. And these guys are already working with a bunch of companies in the carbon credit space. So we're not just cross-referencing to other CI certificate developers, but other carbon credit developers and stuff as well. And to make sure that we avoid double counting and that this is legit. So we've got this stuff ready to go. It's just like, gosh, we need again, like we know how to build the supply. I think we've proven that. Now it's just the demand's got to come through, whether it be from 45Z or otherwise. That's the next steps. But yeah, to your point, Jim, like the free market is going to solve this. And it's really weird that there's a couple of the ag groups that are advocating for USDA to be more involved in the MRV protocol or MRV process for 45Z, which I think is a terrible idea. To have USDA try to be the ones to gather all this data or get it through the audits like we did, not going to happen. Like, not, it's not going to happen. But there's some groups that are trying to do that. But I think private industry is going to solve this.
Yeah.
Somebody here put in a question. Sorry, I wasn't pushing for questions before. Hopefully I was getting you guys' questions asked here. But end buyers and certificates, if I understand it correctly, the physical can go to the ethanol producer. Is that the best route for the certificate to be brought from the farm level and then sold to corporates looking to make claims against their scope three with mill pond validating the value chain mapping with the corporate value chain and avoidance double counting, kind of like the RTRS RPSO markets. I'm not sure what those ones are, but the concept there being, and I think the point of the question is that the concept here is that the certificates and the physical bushels would be decoupled, kind of like how carbon credits work already. So I can create a carbon credit, or in this case, a CI certificate, where it's one certificate per bushel. Then those, of course, can be batched and aggregated, right? But each certificate could be sold directly to an ethanol producer or a different biofuel producer, or I think, Jim, sounds like we're on the same page of doesn't have to be somebody that's going into 45Z that could buy these CI certificates. If they are able to use it for their own carbon accounting, sweet. I don't care. And Jim, I also think what's going to happen is there's going to be a board of trade and ability
Board of
for
Trade.
a futures market and stuff around these CI certificates. I've already been part of some of those conversations. And man, when some of the things we're talking about in those rooms is so exciting. Like the ability to get investors and stuff involved here too, to start the flow of money early, get farmers access to capital to actually further adopt more regenerative practices and lower
Right.
their scores even more. Like it could be really awesome. But yeah, essential then having a group like Millpont be that third party clearinghouse to make sure that there is no double counting and make sure we have the traceability. But decouple the physical bushels from the CI certificates, basically open up a new carbon credit-ish market, but around carbon intensity certificates rather than metric tons of CO2 equivalent carbon credits.
That's
So,
right. Industry has to do a good job. Everybody, eco-engineers, and I believe you, Mitchell, you have to make sure that you have all good apples in your bushel, right?
yeah,
You can't have any
yeah. One
yeah,
person can screw it up for everyone.
right. One person can screw it up for everyone,
Yeah.
and uh, so that's why we're building these protocols that will have a protected market, a market that retains value,
That's right.
and protects the investment, protects the effort for making these changes.
I call it crossing our T's and dotting our I's, right? If Eco is going to be successful long term as an auditor, they've got a reputation to uphold. If we're going to be successful as an MRV provider in this space, we got a reputation to uphold. And ultimately, the farmers, it's your data and it's you who we're trying to get maximum value for, and biofuel producers. We got to really cross our T's and dot our I's if we want to make these things long term, so that if it is going to be tax credits, we got to make it legit so the tax credit can be extended. We're got to make it legit so that folks from outside of the tax credit world would be interested in buying these things and enable this to scale beyond the tax credit. Like that's why we're doing this stuff, is because we see the bigger picture opportunity and want to make sure that that comes to fruition. Jim, any final thoughts? I've got a couple things I got to wrap up with. But we have used up our whole hour. I kind of figured we would because I had a lot of questions, and hopefully it's been good for everyone. But any final thoughts on your side here, Jim?
No, really a pleasure visiting with you, Mitchell. Thank
It's
you.
been awesome. It's been awesome. Thank you again for your hard work and making this thing happen. So excited, that we were able to get this thing passed, and kudos to our farmers who stuck with it and who were out there on the leading edge. I don't yet know when we're going to do the next batch of audit, right? We're ready to go. We can flip the switch whenever. You guys are ready. We're ready. But farmers, if you do want to get started, you can at least get your free CI score on our software, topsoil.ag. And also, if you want to learn more about what we've got going on, our conference is coming up June 3rd. It'll be down here in Southeast Iowa at the Riverside Casino and their conference center there. So more info will be emailed out about that. But June 3rd is our upcoming event. And of course, if you got more questions, we do our chit chats every week. So we'll be back here tomorrow, talking about comment period stuff and continuing to drive the conversation here. There'll be more webinars coming up as well, and of course, this and all of our webinars are recorded and will be on our YouTube page and the Topsoil podcast. So, but without further ado, I appreciate everybody hanging out with us here today, especially you, Jim. It's been fun. We'll catch you all next time, and thanks for being here.
Thanks a lot, Mitchell.
See ya.